Hi friends, Evelina here. Welcome to the Homecomings podcast, an Audible initiative sharing vulnerable conversations with purpose-driven creatives on their life journeys, all with the intention to inspire people listening to discover the meaning of home in their own lives and come deeper back to their truest versions of self. We use home as a metaphor to represent all that beckons comfort, familiarity, and belonging for your unique life journey. Whether that's through the work that you do, the people you surround yourself with, or the things that bring you the most joy in life. Because to live a life with more home means to live a more mindful and beautiful life. And isn't that the greatest intention for us all? I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. I'm so excited to share today's guest on the show, my dear friend and incredible soul human, Jomar Crespo. Jomar is such a special soul for a lot of reasons. For one, he's someone who over the years has become a really close friend in my life. It's so funny when I think about how life so beautifully and you could say randomly, but I always believe there's an intention behind it. So beautifully and synchronistically maybe works in bringing us exactly what we need, whether it's people, books, podcasts, resources, opportunities, relationships, whatever. And it's really, really wild when I think about the dynamic that Jomar and I have shared throughout our lives. We were friends in high school, but just acquaintances. Like I would see him at parties. I was out with my Polish girlfriends, just going to these random parties, and he would be out with his buddies and we would hang out. But we would always have the best time. Like he was just one of those peoples that we would run into, and whenever we did, it was always just a lovely time. And then over the years, we kind of have been walking and navigating our life's paths, but I would say, I don't even know. And we've talked about this and we can't even quite remember how we reconnected, but I think it was him just reaching out on Instagram, DMing me, something like that. But over the years, we've grown a deeper friendship. And I would say definitely, especially this year, where we just got into conversating more. And interestingly, going into these really beautiful, deep heart to heart conversations just about life and what we're navigating in our life journeys. And I truly believe and feel, and I share and go into it in this episode of the reason why I believe Jomar has come back into my life to this capacity. I mean, there's a number of reasons, but amongst the biggest, it's to deepen my relationship to faith and trust in a way that I have not yet maybe had in my life to date, because he is someone who lives by unwavering faith in all that he does. And I'm so excited for everyone to listen to this episode to hear a little bit more of his story and understand exactly what that looks like, because he's lived such a multifaceted, and I will say unique is the word that's coming for me, a very unique life that is not the more traditional path, which is why I was so excited to have him on the show and pick his brain about his journey, and ask him very specific questions on how he knew what exactly this path was looking like and unfolding to be. Because as he shares in this conversation, there have been a lot of moments that were like, whoa, holy cow, like what's going on? Like completely not knowing what the next move was, but leaning deeper into that faith and that trust in his path just unfolding exactly the way that it was meant to. And in holding true to that unwavering faith and trust, truly, it's brought him to where he is today, which is living in Puerto Rico, this beautiful island, and living out his career currently, as of now, as a journeyman lineman. And for those wondering, like, what's a journeyman lineman? It's basically the electrical workers that do the really dangerous, life-threatening, everyday work of working on power lines, making sure that we got the electricity, we're good to go, especially after the dangerous storm seasons and all of that. So that is his life's work. And he is definitely someone who lives life on the edge, not only with his career and what he's doing, but just in general, surfing, skydiving, like all the wild things, which to me are so, so fascinating. So we get into all of those different things about his journey, his passions, his values. A lot of topic and beautiful conversation around fear in particular, because he's someone who, for me, and I expressed to him, like, you are so fearless in all that you do. Like, what is that? Like, where did that come from? We unpack all of that in this beautiful conversation. I think last thing I want to share before we get into the episode is another reason why I wanted to have him on the show is because he is among the first guests, at least to date in the short lifespan of homecomings, that is not again, I mentioned like not very much living a traditional life, but I think within the context of the guests that I've had to date and interviewed, where everyone has been an entrepreneur or a business owner, um, Jomar is not, I guess, in that category. Or and I guess I'll say yet in air quotes because he has such big ambitions to start his own ventures one day. And I just want to share, maybe preface in stating that for me at least, it's not about, everyone needs to start their own business and be aligned on this path, because there's something so amazing and fulfilling for me, yes, having started my own business and I love it. But I'm very conscious, and I'm especially deepening this mindset for myself where it's like, this is not everyone's path. Like, you could be working a 9 to 5 or be a stay at home mom or whatever it is and be so fulfilled. And that is so beautiful. And I think that is exactly the point. It's about that fulfillment and that joy. If having your own business is that, then perfect. And if not, if it's a more traditional, stable job, that's perfect. But is it bringing you joy? Are you truly fulfilled? And I think the biggest knock that I have, um, because I experienced it myself when I was in my 9 to 5, in my corporate job, I was not happy, but I was lying to myself because I didn't know it at the time, but I was clouded with this idea of shit. Like, okay, I graduated college with my architecture degree. I have to do architecture. And little did I know in that moment that I was keeping myself so small. I was keeping myself so small and shutting myself off from the potential and the opportunity that lives on the other side of the what ifs. And so I'm really passionate about this. And I think this is really what fuels a lot of these conversations, is that it comes down to that sense of fulfillment and joy that you're experiencing from whatever it is you're doing. So I was really looking forward to this conversation with Jomar in particular, because again, he's living this non-traditional life, but he's finding fulfillment in that. And it's so beautiful. And so we unpack what that looks like for him. How is it that he is garnering joy from the simple things in life, which is another big talking point of, it doesn't always have to be so complicated. Like, we really deserve to have ease in our lives. And I think as humans, we tend to really overcomplicate a lot of those things for ourselves. So he touches on that so beautifully in this discussion. And it's something that I deeply resonated with myself, because that's especially been a narrative I've been trying to break. Like, why am I always making my life so hard? Like, it could actually be easy. And paying attention to those moments of life where there is flow over force. Like, if something is like very, very difficult, whether it's in a relationship or a job, that could be a telltale sign or clue that maybe it's not meant for you and maybe it's time to pivot or switch. So we get into all of that, plus so much more in this really, really magical conversation. So without further ado, I'm excited to bring you my dear friend and this lovely conversation with Jomar Crespo. I'm excited to dive into this conversation with you, I think specifically because you're the first guest to date that I'm chatting with that I will say is a little bit of a deviation from the previous guests that I've had on, because season one was all about interviewing all of my clients who have their own businesses that I supported them with in branding. Um, and to date, you don't currently have your own business, but I know you have ambitions and dreams to pursue that path in life. And this is just to say, I guess, to preface, like, the way when I'm dreaming into the show, this isn't about like me just talking to people who all have their businesses. It's really the deeper stuff behind it. It's like, are you purpose driven? Like, what is lighting you up? It's not that everyone also like needs to have a business in life, because that's not the premise at all, but it's more so about like, what is lighting people up. So I guess we could start there with that question,
Yeah.
before we kick off and dive deeper, is what's currently lighting you up in your life right now?
Good question. And you said it. It's not. I don't know exactly how you just worded it. That it's not exact. Not everybody's gonna be like going after their own business, but in a way, like we all are a business. Um, like in that book. I don't know if it was from this book, but there's a saying. Mind your business, and that's very important to be successful. Is to mind your business, and we all have a business. And I think you pointed that out to me once before too. It's like you're actually very good at that, at pointing out what a person's business is. Like, oh, you're this type of person. Boom, 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 boom. That's your business. So I think we all have that. But as far as what's lighting me up, um, that freedom, I think that's everybody's goal, or should be everybody's goal, maybe. Uh, but working towards a particular comfort level, lifestyle. Uh, that's ultimately what fuels me. It's fueled me for a while, but seeing the pieces come together a little bit more clear uh, is even more motivation. So freedom in the future, being able to travel whenever you want, just breaking away from having to be somewhere at a particular time. And then looking into the future, more in depth on that, I think if I were to settle down and have kids, I want to be around for the family. So family is a big thing for me, and having that time with the family is everything. I don't want to have to be off at work or be one of those dads that are away. Dad's working, he's not around, which is still like honorable. You know what I'm saying? Because you're you're trying to get resources right for the family. But I think it'd be so freaking cool if I can just travel the world with my family. So that's what drives me right now. And so the question is how, right? Because that's so time. I mean, time is all relative, right? I was going to say that's so far in the future, but realistically, it might not be. But it feels like it's so far away from where I'm at now. So then it's aligning those pieces of the puzzle now. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so allowing God to work is a huge part of that, and meditating. Um, I know you know this, but the long hours that I end up working doesn't allow for that meditation process, that thinking process about my business. Because if I'm spending 80 hours a week on somebody else's business or a collective group's business, something that's outside of what I'm trying to do, even though it's
Mm-hmm.
part of what I'm trying to do because it's gaining right the funds that I need now, but it doesn't allow for that meditation to get the answers that I need.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. You're in a bit of a, I don't even know what word to use. I don't even want to say transition period, but you're definitely in the talks and conversations we've had. It's definitely a period of seeking clarity and direction of kind of what's coming next. And where you're currently at, what I want to dive into a little bit is your current profession, which is you're currently working as a lineman down in your lovely island of Puerto Rico. But all the while, you have your sights set on, like you said, like what's coming and what's coming next. And I love that because there's something that is so, I mean, I know for me, because I'm such a creature of change, I'm always looking ahead to what's next. So I think there's like that, like attracts like. Like I'm attracted to people who have the same kind of mindset of always kind of thinking forward and what's coming next. Because for me, there is something that I don't know. I don't know if I want to say scary or paralyzing, but if there's too much sameness or staticness, like if a person is always doing the same thing, I'm like always thinking like, okay, so like, but what's next?
yeah, I get it.
So I always appreciate, in the deep talks that we've had in the hearts to hearts, it's, our conversations flow into like dreaming into the future and the potential of what that looks like. And so I want to dive into this deeper a little bit with you because where you're at right now, and maybe you could share with people listening what exactly, like to set the stage, the scene of the context, because you're currently working as a lineman in Puerto Rico. So I guess to start off, for anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, can you give like a couple sentence description of what your
Yeah,
job entails?
yeah, absolutely. So a journeyman lineman through through our union, so it's the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers.
Hmm.
Um, so we travel the country and the world um, building power lines. So you set poles, you run the wire, you energize, de-energize, you do storm work. So the storm, Hurricane Lee is actually supposed to be headed your way, if I'm not mistaken. It should be headed up towards Massachusetts at this point, I think. as just skipped over Puerto Rico, so we didn't get hit by that. But natural disasters, that take out power lines. Um, so since we're on the same union, like right now, for example, if something were to go down in California, um, I could look online and see what's going on, see how many guys are needed, make some phone calls. I could fly out to Cali, for example. That's actually one of the things that really encouraged me to do this career was the ability to travel because I've always wanted to travel, and here I am. When I found this job that I'm able to travel and work the hours that I want to work. Essentially, I mean, it's all contract work, but if I wanted to be, say, for example, in Connecticut, installing streetlights, for 8-hour days, 5 days a week, I can do that. If I want to be on a transmission line somewhere, even actually in Connecticut or Mass or wherever, if I want to work 7 days a week, 12, 14-hour days, I can find the job to do that. So there's all these
Mm,
options. And so you're able to fit it into however you want to work it. And if you're at a job that you don't necessarily like, you leave and go on to another one. Um,
yeah,
so that's a topic I think we spoke on yesterday a little bit
yeah,
when you're not happy when you're not happy with your current circumstances, like you're in control. You just
yeah,
decide to
yeah,
find something else. But
yeah, 1000%. I'm such a firm believer in that. I think as you're talking, what I realized too, what I think is really beautiful is you were saying at the beginning that as you're dreaming into the future, you're thinking about this idea of freedom because that's such a top value for you. And so it's interesting that you have chosen this current career because it is so freedom based. It allows you to travel, which is such a value for you. Um, I'm curious, and I don't even know if I know the full story because I know we talked about you transitioning into being a lineman and all that, but was that a driving force for you deciding to do this career because you were craving that freedom and autonomy? I guess I'm always so fascinated with like what drives people to make the decisions or like go from point A to B, right? And with something like career choices, career is like it's such a big part of our lives. So what is the driver behind that? And I always think too about people who make decisions on their careers but are so unfulfilled and so happy like they're sitting at their desk job or whatever. I mean, because I was that person. I graduated from college and I was at my desk job, and I kept thinking all the while like, okay, well, this is what I should be doing. um but all the while I'm like, this doesn't feel right. And to your point, like I made the conscious effort to search for what that was next. So circling back to the original question that I think I want to ask you is what was the driver behind you ultimately choosing this path right now that you're on, being a journeyman lineman?
uh, at that point in time, right, the driving factor was just trying something else essentially, because at that point in time, I didn't necessarily, I didn't know about this career till later on. I got in when I was 30 is when I applied at 29. So at that point in time, it just, the opportunity arose and I was like, well, I can see myself doing that. And I thought I thought it made more money. I knew that it made more money than what I was doing at that time. So I wish I can tell you like, oh, I found this great thing and uh, I'm driven to do this. It was more so just the circumstances of what I needed to do at the time and just trying
Yeah,
something else. I think it's
yeah,
important to always be down to try something new too and see the possibilities because you might
mm,
love the job that you have now, but I don't think you should just totally disregard other things that are out there either. So
yeah,
anytime there's an opportunity that comes up, play with the idea in your head. Can I see myself doing this or something? Um, but it wasn't until I got in that immediately I was like, this is it. Right in boot camp, before I even passed, when I was in boot camp and I had to climb poles and stuff, and I'm just looking at the brotherhood type of environment, just the guys helping each other and all towards like one goal. I loved it. And I knew right then and there, I'm like, this is it right here. Before I even started working, I was just training.
yeah,
I knew it was it because I wanted a job. I look at careers, you said, something along the lines of like careers are so important, right? But what's really important is where you spend the hours of your life. for example. That tends to be the career that you choose. So that's the important part. Um, and I wanted a job, a career. I wanted to spend my time outdoors, working out. Like these are things that I value, traveling.
Mhm.
So this career encompasses all of that. If you
Yeah.
decide to go that route, because I can work in a substation, for example. I could work in one spot, or I can work just traveling. Um, and I like the travel aspect of it. I knew I was going to travel. I was thinking about actually working in California before, but I was always guided towards Puerto Rico. So going all the way to California just dawned on me. I'm like, why would I go all the way to California? I should head towards Florida and get myself closer to Puerto Rico. Um,
Because that's where you're originally from.
yeah, so I was born in Puerto Rico,
Home
and
island. Yeah.
yeah, my mom moved us to Connecticut when I was 2, and I was always flying back and forth.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. I think what's so beautiful about your journey, well, before I dive into this, I will just say it's interesting that you shared that you didn't necessarily know, I guess, in a way before you started this job that it was going to be so aligned, but you were open to it. And then it's like
yeah.
you got confirmation from God that, like, oh, actually, this is like what I'm meant to do because it felt so aligned. So that's really interesting. And I think it's a differentiation. And not to say there's a right or wrong or anything, but it points to maybe two different approaches that people take when searching. It's like one approach could be like, I know what I need and I'm going to go in search of that. And the other is just being blindly open to seeing where you're guided. And I think there's a beauty in both of them. And it sounds like the latter worked out for you and it's continuing to inform the next steps for you in, in your life right now. Cause that job brought you down to Puerto Rico, which what I wanted to touch on next was I love, we've had conversations about this, but I think what's really interesting is when you shared with me before, like this internal knowing feeling that you've always had of like wanting to be back in Puerto Rico, because that's your home island and you have a deep love for it. And I love, maybe you could speak to this, but because I don't want to butcher exactly what you shared with me. I forget exactly what it was, but it was like this feeling of like not ever belonging when you were in Connecticut. Like, talk about that a little bit and ultimately maybe share with us, like, what, how did you always know that you were meant to be back in Puerto Rico? Because I'm always questioning this idea of belonging and where I'm going next for myself.
Mm. Yeah, belonging is an interesting phrase, right? Or belong word concept, belonging. But it's just I was starting to laugh because I don't want to like bash Connecticut. Now there's a lot of people
you
actually.
could bash, you could bash it
No, no, no,
because I'll
no.
bash it too.
It's actually in like a perfect location between Boston and New York. You got some city. It's easy. They got plenty of places to hike. It's mountainous.
No, I
Connecticut is
know.
cool,
As
man.
much as much uncomfort as I have, I will always kind of like, hold it near and dear in my heart.
Yeah, I mean, I always respect it, especially if
Yeah,
I grew up there. I grew up in Connecticut. Why would
yeah.
I? How can you bash like the place that you grew up or the circumstances in which that attributed to who you are today? It's crazy to me.
Mm,
Sometimes people like move out and they're like, oh yeah, like screw this place. It's like, what? Come on, man. So
yeah,
I like to
it
start by
shaped.
saying that. I'm never gonna. I'm proud of I love actually the upbringing that I had in New Britain and Connecticut. I had such a cool mix of people around me, and um, it was a good environment overall. But so at a young age, though, my dad has me like literally driving around and like at a very young age in Puerto Rico, and like has a little dirt bike for me. We'll go to the beach. It's a tropical island, right? So like, you're exposed to that at a young age, and then you go to Connecticut and like where there's no really beaches, or when people are excited to go to a beach, it's just not the same. And so
Hmm.
those were the moments where I'm like out of place. Like this is not home. Like this ain't it. Um, so I mean, that's as simple as that is. Just coming from just being on a tropical island to then being in Connecticut is a huge difference. And I knew I belonged on that tropical island. But I also do believe that there's something to do with where you're born.
Hmm.
In the first developing stages of my life that I don't even remember, I was there, you know, in those beaches, getting that sun, eating the food of that land. So I think that has something to do with it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
love that. And you're right. It's like those beginning early stages leave the imprint on you. And it's interesting because I think again, it could be in two directions. Like with you, it seems like those imprintations left a mark that you knew were gonna eventually lead you back. Whereas I think about it for myself, it's like because I'm originally from Poland, and so I'm always questioning this idea too of like, could I ever see myself going back to Poland? Like, could I live there? Like, is there something pulling me there? I don't know. You know, when I think about it, I'm traveling to Spain in a couple of weeks now. There's something really exciting about that, being back in Europe. And I don't know. I'm curious where my journey is going to take me and unfold. Like, is it going to bring me closer to those roots? Because where I'm at right now, there's a deep discomfort for me of I think just being in America because I keep thinking of like what state I want to live in. And I was going back and forth between Florida and New York and all that stuff. But all the while, I actually think I want to just leave the country, which is so interesting. And so, you talking about this desire to go back to your roots, being raised in Puerto Rico and experiencing that, I wonder if there's something pulling me back to mine at this point in my life, like
Mm.
traveling back to Europe. It's
There's only one
interesting.
way to find out.
I
It's
know.
traveling, is getting out there,
I gotta
and
go.
then those answers will come to you, you know.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
way I feel about that.
Yeah. You're so right. And just being open to seeing what happens and letting go of any plans or expectations. Um, there's something deeply, I think, at this point in my life where I'm really trying to lean into the full surrender and trust. Again, that's my that's my word of the year, as you know.
It's a good
And
one.
actually, yeah, I'd love to ask you about trust and but beyond trust, just your beautiful perspective on faith, because that's been something that we've been talking about in our discussions and lovely little heart to hearts that we have as we're supporting each other navigating life. And I want to just say, I was thinking about this actually, Jomar, before we, pressed record and stuff before getting on this conversation. And like, it's so wild when we think about how people come into our lives at different points. And it's so beautiful too, because I think about, we talked about this, like we were friends in high school, but like we were like party friends, right? Like we would go to the parties and just hang out. And, I guess at that point in our lives, we were meeting the need of just like fun and forming great memories at that time. But now we're kind of back in each other's lives but in a different context. And I'm so grateful for the reconnection for so many reasons, but I think one of the biggest is this beautiful way that you've been able to like almost like deepen my trust in my faith by you telling your stories, but also the perspective that you share on that. So can you talk a little bit about what your perspective on just trust in general looks like? And I'm curious if that's the perspective you've always had or if that's kind of evolved over recent time.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved. Um, I would say something around 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I just had this increase of faith. Um, Prior to that, I always knew that, as we should all follow our hearts, right? And that's where the trust, I think, comes in. I used to not fully trust following my heart. You see society around you, all these people that are in your circle have their mind fixed on this, and your mind is like totally on left field. And even when I would get an appreciation for thinking out of the box, or like, man, you're so different. Like it's so refreshing. Like I feel like my, what's the word? I don't know. My end goals were just so vast that it was hard to even explain. I felt like an outcast in a way.
Oh,
And so that's lacking trust, right? If you feel that way, you're not trusting yourself 100%. So it really wasn't actually when I initiated this move. when I moved out of Connecticut and went down to Florida, um, without a job, just in hopes that this Puerto Rico thing would pop off. But I just knew I had just had to get away, and that that was the point where like the trust really uh, took off. Moving. Now that I think about it, just moving, because I was always down for adventure. You could have said any like random thing. Let's go to this random country for a week. I'd be like, cool, let's do it. Like just totally random. I'll figure things out as I go. But it's different when you're moving yourself to a new location, and that's what went down when I moved down to Florida. So that was like a crash course into learning how to trust. Because I remember being in a hotel. I didn't even know where I was headed, to be honest. So I got this U-Haul truck, and then the lady asked me, "What's the, destination?" And I just said Miami, because I knew that I was going to start off in Miami, because that was like my favorite
Yeah.
part of Florida that I had discovered at up until that point. So I said Miami. She punched in some zip code of the U-Haul over there, and she gave me an address, and that was the address I punched into GPS. I just took off, and the first 2 nights, I literally just found a hotel as I was coming into the city. And that was a project in and of itself, because I got this trailer. Like parking is like a hassle down there. That's like a whole other story. But I remember being in a hotel room the following day, like, whoa, here I am. Like, I don't know where I'm going to sleep tomorrow or the next day. I'm like trying to organize these thoughts, but completely content. And I think that's kind of like what trust looks like when you're just comfortable making your moves, because you made these moves for a
Mm,
reason. Like you're here for a reason. There's something going on. You might not have all the answers, but you got to trust. Um, and I just laugh because I just remember, like, yes, I'll never forget this. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine about being homeless, and I would like play around with that idea. And I remember sending her a message. Like I took a picture of like when I woke up, I was like in a small little hotel room there in Miami Beach, and I was laughing to myself of the circumstances that I was in. And I sent her the message. I was like, look, like I made it to Florida. Like I'm still homeless. I wrote down something funny about being homeless. Um, but when you learn to trust, it's like you're just content, just living and just figuring things out. As long as you have, good intentions and you mean well, right? And you're just conscious. I think everything is just works out. It just
yeah.
has to.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was so beautiful after that experience that you had was then you ended up finally coming down to Puerto Rico and essentially kind of manifesting your job that you have now. And all of the, I guess we could say, well, I don't want to say all of the things that you were searching for, but you have gotten clarity at that point. So I imagine that after you had arrived in Puerto Rico and were in that place of being supported with your job, that was almost confirmation for you that that trust and that like risk almost,
Yeah.
if we want to say, was
Yeah.
worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember another conversation. So I check into my room, um, and they have some sort of deal where if you need linemen, right, to get linemen, you provide like lodging and everything like that. So I checked into this hotel where they had me at the time, and I was like mind blown. I literally walk in, and like I had to like FaceTime my cousin, and I was like, bro, like look at this. Like look where I'm at. I'm back where I wanted to be on the west side of the island, which is where I'm from. Um, I'm like, this is insane. It's like you can't imagine that, because like when you ask God for some things, right? There's a saying like, don't be surprised when it's like way past what you even anticipated. I just wanted to
Mm,
be in Puerto Rico, and I was willing to be legitimately like borderline homeless. I was like, I'm bilingual. I'll just go there, just coming up through different stages of my life. I was like, man, I could just surf all day and be happy. I don't care. I don't even need money. Like I had that mindset. I just wanted to be down in Puerto Rico. Um, and here I am, just God just shipped me to Puerto Rico through this job where I'm provided a place to stay. And it's like, here you go. It was crazy. So uh, yeah, you're exactly right. In that confirmation, when I walked into that room, I'll never forget. And I was just take the video outside. I see these beautiful, lush, trees that are recognized, the trees from here, from Puerto Rico. I'm just like, wow. Showed my
Yeah.
cousin. I'm like, dude, look at this. I didn't
Yeah.
anticipate that. I didn't even know. That very
Yeah.
last week I was in Florida, my Airbnb was going to be up at the end of that week. And that's where I exhausted all my funds. I was like, well, I'm going to have to, if I don't have to find a job there in Florida by Wednesday, um, or sorry, if I don't get down to Puerto Rico by that Wednesday, I'll have to get a job there. So I was already looking at some jobs as like the plan B. Um, and then I got that call to come to Puerto Rico. I was like, yes. Just being down there was the main thing because that's the thing. Money, I've never been like so much after the money. I guess when I would have like little side hustles, I would like I'd work on cars and I'd try to. There's just money, the opportunity for money all around us, and
Mhm.
I've always known that, and I've always been like, well, I'll be able to get it, no problem. Um, it was more so being in Puerto Rico. I was mind blown. So then I worked for like 3 months, and then I just took 7 months off. So it wasn't about the money. It was about just life's path, about getting down here. I happened to make money, which is awesome, and like I was able to pay some debt in that amount of time and everything, and set myself up. But that was a very interesting part of the journey. Like there's
Mhm.
many side stories within that process of that first year to where I'm at now.
Yeah, you've
That was
you've
the
had
building process.
yeah, you've had such an interesting journey, Jomar. Like when especially this year when we really like reconnected and you were just sharing everything you navigated, I'm like, oh my gosh. And back to what I started talking about earlier about like this deepening of faith and trust for me, like I use that phrase expander a lot, and you've definitely expanded me in deepening my faith and trust because hearing you navigate your own journey that was like all over the place, like not only were you traveling and migrating, and at one point you were kind of homeless and you were without money and you didn't know where you were going to work next. I'm over here. This year for me, 2023 has been, it's been a challenging year. There's been so much unexpected things that have been happening. I mean, I shared with you, and just to give people listening context, when the year had started, I went in with these beautiful ambitions. I'm like, this is going to be the best year ever. And I had all these plans, and I was in a relationship at the time, and I had all these plans for my business. And slowly, as the year unraveled, it's like one by one, everything crumbled. Like my relationship ended, business slowed down, like, and all the while, I'm like internally trying to stay calm. Like, what? What do I do? And then I hear you sharing your experiences of how you navigated, like, we could call them like rock bottoms or like deep moments of uncertainty, but then hearing how things kind of, and I don't know what word to use, like it's not to say that you were rewarded for it, but things just came your way. You held your ground. You
I
stood,
aligned
and
myself.
yes. And hearing you share your experiences, it like, I don't know, I think there's something so beautiful about hearing other people in your situation navigate it and almost like instill hope for you. You've definitely given me a lot of that hope to just really stay strong to my vision and keep holding it down. The world's not crumbling. Like these are just little hiccups, but I'm trusting
Yeah,
that where I'm heading next is where I'm meant to go. So I guess this is just all to say, like, thank you, Jomar, for
yeah, yeah, yeah. We tend to lose focus. It's funny because I laugh. I had this guy tell me there's a saying in Spanish, right? So the beginning of my process down here, when I first took that time off, I stayed at an Airbnb for about a month and a half, and the owner of the property was doing some sort of work outside, and we were just, talking. Um, and I told him that I wasn't working, that I wasn't sure where I was going to stay next necessarily. I mean, my grandma's house was like down the road, and I could crash there. It's not a big deal. I don't want people to think I'm like just going to be on the streets. I got family and friends all around me, but you're trying to do something on your own, your own way. Um, but he was like, dude, like there's a saying in Spanish, "Cómo vas a sobrevivir?" which is like, how are you going to survive? And I was like, just so mind blown, like survive, like. like I could literally like pick fruit like around me. Like it doesn't have to come to like where I'm searching for fruit, but I mean, there's fruit stands, like the best foods possible are
There's
surrounding
abundance.
you. You got
Yeah,
sunlight, you got the beach. Like what? Like how am I gonna survive? Surviving is easy. We tend to forget about these simple things. It's easy to survive. Like survive isn't a difficulty at all. The difficulty is up here, just navigating everything that's in our head, being bombarded with like negative thoughts and like all these things of how we think our life should go. So another like key phrase that I like a lot is if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
I
Because
love
you
that
have
one.
you have these plans, but it's totally out of control. You don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know if you're gonna be here, tomorrow. That's why every morning, you wake up with gratitude. Y'all made it. Another day. Boom.
Yeah, no, when you shared that phrase with me, Jomar, I was like, oh, this is perfect. And it's so true because the more you try to plan, the more that you're almost like digging yourself in a hole for things to potentially unravel and go their other way and then leave you disappointed, which I feel like I had to face and experience myself this year. And ultimately, where I'm at right now is just recognizing that there is this deep level of trust that is being called on me in this life in a way that, like, yes, it's trusting myself, but beyond that, and this is something I don't think I've ever really looked into and considered, it's like trusting, like, I mean, ultimately, it's like trusting God, like trusting what is meant to be. And it's really rocked me because I'm someone who likes to control and likes to always be um, I don't know, just like certain and like there's this like knowing of like, okay, I got this and everything's gonna be okay.
Mm.
Cause there's a comfort and a sense of security that you get from that. So it's been really unnerving. But like the flip side of faith and this whole topic that we're diving into is the more faith you have, the less fear you have. Cause I feel like both of those kind of go hand in hand. And Jomar, you strike me as someone who is like utterly fearless. Like
Yeah.
one, like the job that you're doing, like you're risking your life, like basically every day doing your lineman work. But then even just things that naturally light you up, like you skydive and then you like go surfing and you'll do all these like really amazing, incredible, but like high action sports activities. Like I'm curious what your relationship to fearlessness has been. Like, have you always been this way, or has it come deeper as you've deepened your faith?
I think I've always been that way. And that was actually, it just reminded me, like another thing, the group of friends that I had in Connecticut just didn't think that way.
Mm,
Um, and actually, the friends that I made in Connecticut that are from other places, like my boy Jordan, um, he's into kiteboarding and all these adventurous things. I'm like, boom, finally, I found somebody who's on my level of thinking. But I've always been that way. And it's just funny where fear comes from. You hit the nail on the head. I think is just a lack of faith. It's like, what are you afraid of? Are you confident in your ability? Like first and foremost, like I didn't start this job that I have going up and energized lines right away. There's certain steps that you got to take before you get to this level and test and everything. So it's that preparedness. Um, you know, my first time skydiving, I went tandem, and they want to make sure that you're good. That you have this, that you're able to do this, right? So you'll go up in the plane and they're like, all right, what altitude are we at? You look at your altimeter, we're at 1,500 feet. You go up, bounce. So what are you gonna do? They're like constantly talking to you. They're trying to see if you're gonna get nervous, if you're panicking, if you're whatever. Like, all right, now where are we now? 5,000 feet, blah blah. You go up and then, so you're tandem. If anything goes wrong, like the guy's got you, or lady, whoever is with you, and they run through an exercise. Every 5 seconds you check your altimeter. Um, you feel the pilot chute. You go back normal. You check your altimeter. You feel the pilot chute, and then you're supposed to pull it at whatever they have you pull it at in tandem. I want to say about 5,500 feet. So once you see you're at 5,500 feet, you go to pull it. You give the okay. You do that. You go to pull it. Wow, and then you pull it. So you go through that to test your ability. So then the person's like, all right, this person can do that. They can jump alone. So it's not like just going out all willy nilly, but having that confidence, you trust yourself. Now I'm going back to fear. Like, where does fear fit in that? There's no fear in going through these processes. And it's just, I think at a young age, I realized that fear will inhibit you. It's just an inhibiting thing. It
Mm.
just totally gets in the way of things. Fear. Um, there should be a respect, which actually this son I learned fairly recently. I had an issue since I had such an issue with fear. I had an issue with the that um, phrase or that biblical word of like God fearing or fear of God. And that's something I totally never understood. I'm
Mm.
like, why would you fear God? What? Like, fear is something I would never even want in my life. And I'm a fear God. I was just so confused. But really, what it comes down to are
Yeah.
respect. It comes down to respect of God. And that's something I still want to look into in terms of language, which maybe it might translate to something differently in other languages. But I think what it really means is respect of God, respect of your own
Mm.
life, respect of this equipment that you're about to use, respect of these circumstances that you put yourself in, and all that, you know, respect. There's no need for fear. I went off on a tangent there. The question was if I
No, I
always
love that.
had that kind of faith. Um, it what I guess I always had it, just that lack or knowing that fear isn't good. But what I've grown to now is just the understanding of faith with the relationship with fear of respect.
Yeah, no, that's so so good. And I think what I'm finding too is, I mean, you touched on this when you were talking about even just this, I think survival was the word that you used around being in a place where you feel like, okay, survival, like this is going to be so hard, but you have abundance all around you. And the word that came to me as you were talking was this idea of like simplicity. And like as humans, we are overcomplicating like everything in our
Yeah, that's what I
lives.
was trying to
So
get
when
at,
it comes to
actually.
that, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's like it could, even with the faith and the fear thing, like I think it could be so simple, but we're overcomplicating so many things. And I can understand that because I mean, I've navigated so many instances of fear in my own life. And I think when I look back, a lot of it just came from other people. My family naturally kind of like, fearing me doing things differently, or like even when I started my business, there's like fear, like, oh my gosh, how are you going to survive? And all these things. And then there's all these societal norms and constructs that are imposed of like, you have to do things this way. And when you break against it, it's different. So maybe change or difference naturally elicits a little bit of that fear. But ultimately, if we're able to let that go, it comes
Yeah,
back
it
to
shouldn't be
something
fear.
so simple. Yeah,
Yeah, it
no,
shouldn't be
you're
fear.
so, so, so right.
A respect, man. Just like, oh, is there something I should be respecting more? But fearing is like,
Mhm.
I don't know. Fear shouldn't just fit into one's life, really. I mean, and then this is still a
Yeah.
developing story, right? I'm still learning as I go, so I might learn
Yeah.
some new information later to where it'd be like, oh no, like I just told all these people not to fear, but maybe maybe it's a good thing. But just in my life, I don't know. It just doesn't make you think clearly.
Hmm.
I think fear just mess you all
Yeah.
up mentally. But that's what I wanted to get at too. Actually,
Hmm.
was the simplicity of things. Um, when you
Yeah.
think about, I got this goal. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this, this, and that. Boom, boom, boom. And it doesn't work out that way. Day two, month two, second quarter. It's like, fuck. You're just like, oh man. Uh, but you forget. I think gratitude is what brings you back to simplicity and trust. Because if you show gratitude, you're just like, man, like look where I'm at. Most people don't even think this way. Most people don't even get to fail in the way that I did. If you did fail, whatever the circumstances are. So I think gratitude is just a huge part of that, of faith. It really just kind of
Hmm.
reaffirms that. Because then you realize this is where I need to be.
Yeah.
When you realize this is where I need to be, you just continue walking in faith.
Gratitude practice daily, that's something, for me, that's something that is so simple and so powerful. And I've seen it firsthand when I do my like 5-minute journal in the mornings and all that. But it's also one of the first things that I tend to forget and let go of. It's almost because I don't know, there's maybe there's a part of me too that um feels like, oh, if it's not hard or complicated, like it's not worthwhile. This is actually a narrative I've been reframing for myself the last several years of like,
Mhm.
what if some things in life are actually meant to be really easy and effortless?
I think everything is. I don't think
Mm,
life is supposed to be so difficult where you're just
mm,
introduced with constant struggle. I mean, yeah, you're gonna have, some things when you feel like you're really aligned with something, you might have things thrown in your way that you have to work through. You're definitely gonna need to work hard, but I don't think things should be so complicated. Especially like in a relationship. I mean, if you got to be constantly working on something in your relationship, you might be in the wrong relationship. I don't think it should be that freaking
mm-hmm.
difficult. Same thing with life or work. If you're constantly stressed out, if this ain't working out, this ain't working out, this ain't working out, you should probably take a turn somewhere else. Try something else. Try door number two. You know, stop trying to yank on that one
Yes.
door that won't open. Go to the next one. This one has gates that you can just swing open. But sorry,
I love that
I
analogy
had
so
to
much.
interject there, but I think we lagged, so I threw you off. My bad.
I'm so glad you interjected because you shared a really great analogy and it's such a good visual. You're right. Like, so often we're trying to pull the doors when if you just step to the side, there could be a really beautiful, easy gate
Yeah.
that you could walk through. And this is again going back to that idea of control. Like, I think, again, like lots of us, many of us have this tendency to want to, like, oh, white knuckle life or do this. But to your point, and I'm also really trying to embrace this, like, where there's force, sometimes it's, or to your point, like probably more often than not, it's not meant to be. I'm such a believer. And I've been seeing this more in my life as I've slowly started to surrender. It's like those moments that flow. Oh, those feel so good. It's like, how can we get more of those flow moments in life? And so you said, like, you use the example of relationships 1000%, but even in careers, like if it always feels so hard, like if you're always struggling, I think that is a telltale clue that people could start to pay attention to of like, all right, something's not working here. Where could I shift and pivot and try the gate instead of the door?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
And you
so
could
good.
pivot. You could try new things the unlimited amount of times too. I think society puts this pressure. No, you chose this, you got to stick to it. No, you can do whatever the heck you want. You know, I'm a journeyman lineman today. I can decide to do something else tomorrow, and that's something that I try to preach too. Actually, because there's a lot of careers where it's like, all right, you reach this point. These guys aspire to be a journeyman lineman, then they become a journeyman lineman, and then it's like, all right, that's it. Now I'm a journeyman lineman for the rest of my life. Like that doesn't sit well with me. It's just a means to an end, and I love the career. I love what I do. I wouldn't be doing it otherwise. But it's like, I've
Hmm.
played with the ideas of being a skydive instructor, of different, like a whole bunch of different things, and just knowing that all these possibilities are there for you too. You can choose different paths, and many you could loop back around to the same path if you want to, and then try it. Maybe that door will be open. Maybe somebody already broke in. Uh, but that
Yeah.
idea of being like stuck and definitely don't listen to society. I mean, that's probably a key takeaway there. Follow your heart. Listen to your heart.
Thanks to you, I recently reread The Alchemist. And I forget that that is such a, I mean, truly, it's my favorite book because it's so simple. Again, back to that idea of simplicity, but the lessons are so powerful. And to what you just shared about sometimes you have to like walk the whole path to only be brought back to where you are. But that's okay because maybe you needed to walk that path to garner the lessons that you needed to. But all to say, like, to your point, we have freedom and choice to do ultimately like whatever we want. I mean, most people in a lot of circumstances, right? Like I recognize that, for some people that might not be the case always, but I think I'm just such a firm believer that given the circumstances, like if you want something badly enough and you set your sights on it and you go after it, like things will start to fall into place, right? And if you hold true to the vision of like allowing yourself to experience whatever it is that you want to experience and not be held back by your limitations, that path is going to unfold for you. And I think, back to the faith thing, I think there's a lot of that involved in that as well. It's like having that trust and that faith that it's all going to work out.
Yeah, if it's meant for you, it's for you. If it ain't, then it ain't. And it's that
Mhm.
easy. And it's that simple, Just follow your heart.
Back to the idea of, because you were just speaking on this, you know, what you're doing right now, you love your current job. You're in it. You've been in it for a little over what, a year now, right?
This current job in Puerto Rico, you're saying? Or the
Yeah.
career.
Yeah.
Yeah, this current job.
The
Let me see.
yeah.
I started fall of 2021. That's when I came down from Florida. It was October 2021. And then I took some time
It's
off.
almost 2
And
years.
yeah, so I've been down here for work. Yeah, 2 years.
But all the while, you have these ambitions and dreams to essentially see beyond what's next. Like you're dreaming into the next parts and pieces of your life. So, um, share with us a little bit about what that looks like. Like, what are some of your visions for the future? You've shared with me a little bit, but yeah, share with the people's listening what that looks like.
It's funny you say share with us. It made me laugh. I'm like, oh snap. Um, well, you know, I have a lot of dreams and ambitions and goals, right? And I think I'm at a stage where I constantly check back in with myself. So I'll preface it by saying in the past, I felt as though I had no control. I felt as though I couldn't set goals because I'm like, I'm not even in a position to set goals, which is a horrible way of thinking. Um, and it wasn't until I got into this career and I guess, it just evolved to where I was like, oh man, like I can set goals and dreams and where do I want this? So it's still a fairly new thing for me, but thankfully I've been able to make it a habit and journaling and writing. So that's a point where I'm at. I think about all these things that I want to do. I'll write them down in the most random times too. Because they'll be like, I'll be driving and I'll think of an idea and I just open up notes real quick on my phone and boom, I get that idea out and I save it. Um, so I got to constantly go back to my notes and constantly keep meditate, go back to these notes, reorganize. And that's kind of like what my process is right now. Um, because there's a lot of things that I want to do. And I write down a lot of questions and I know I'll get the answers at some point in time. And every once in a while, you get that little bit of anxiety, like, oh man, like, what's going to come of this or how's this going to work out? But, I've learned to snap back to just being into the present and living my life. Um, and then those answers will come later on at some point. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I've gotten a lot of answers coming up to this time off. And now I'm using those answers to continue to build upon and actually create somewhat of a timeline. So that's actually the point that I'm in right now is actually creating a timeline and writing down particular dates now that I have these answers, which literally since the beginning of the year, February, March, I had all these questions on what's my next move, when I'm going to take time off. And that's to get a bit of time, March, April, May, June, July, August, that's 6 months. It's half the year where I didn't have these answers. And what I had to do was focus on the present and make sure I was good in the present, um, which thankfully I did by constantly creating and solidifying good habits. It's been a huge part of my life the past couple of years. Just trying to be that 1% better every day. So that was my main focus. So then 6 months go by, and it's like out of the blue, literally about a week or two ago. Yeah, it wasn't until like about 2 weeks ago, where just like out of the blue, I got these answers. Oh, this is how I want to do it, and you feel it within yourself when it's the right answer. When you know. It's like when I decided to quit, um, or quit that particular job, that particular project. At that point in time, when I came down here, like I said, I worked 3 months. And a lot of guys, especially down here, were like, dude, what is wrong with you? Like, you got this job out here, you're just gonna quit? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, it's time. Like, I knew within myself, I was off for about a week. And within myself, I'm like, that's what it is. I need to quit. And as soon as I thought about the idea, I felt immediately better. So then that's when I knew that's the answer. I got to quit. So that morning, made some phone calls, gave my 2 week notice. Um, so 2 weeks ago, like I was saying, I just got these answers. I'm like, oh, I know when I'm going to do this, when I'm going to do that. And I'm at a point now where I'm going to start to write it down and create that timeline, that plan.
I'm so fascinated by this idea of like knowing for different people because intuition is such a I mean, it's such a beautiful and powerful thing. And I think my journey in the last couple of years has been connecting with my intuition. I think what feels like for the first time in my life. I don't want to say first time because I feel like as kids, we have that internal knowing, but over time it kind of dissipates and gets lost as we're thrown into all the life things. So I don't want to say first time, but it's like a reconnection with that intuition. And I'm tapping into what that feels like for me, but I'm always so fascinated to unpack and understand what that always looks like for other people. So like that knowing when you knew you wanted to quit the job. Was that like a little internal voice? Was that like a full body feeling? Like I know it's like you can't really put words to it, but to whatever capacity you could maybe describe that a little bit deeper. Cause I'm like,
Yeah.
what does that like actually like feel like for you if you could
Yeah.
share?
I love what you said about that. About as a kid, you're not so concerned about outside uh, influences. Society still hasn't messed with your head. So you're able to follow your intuition.
Yeah.
You're aligned. And I think it has to do with an alignment versus misalignment. So as you grow older, you get people have the tendency to get misaligned because they're thrown out of whack because of these outside influences. I should be doing that. I should be doing this. And this person's like, oh, is that what you're doing? So it's like you get misaligned and you're almost taught not to, or we put this pressure upon ourselves not to listen to our intuition, not to follow our hearts. And it's not till later on, if we're able to go introspectively to find that again and get realigned. So I think you saying that you discovered it, this past year, I think you just got realigned with yourself and maybe ask yourself certain
Mm,
questions. Because at least that's what's been happening with me. I, I learn, I learn about myself. I become uh, just go introspective and learn how to take care of myself. That's a huge other thing, which actually for men, I think is a huge um, struggle for a lot of men. I know there's been a lot of talk about men's mental health. I think that has a lot to do with it. Uh, Self care is just so important. I think through self care and being introspective, you get to find that alignment again, which is that intuition. So you got to be good, like mind, body, and soul, to
mhm,
to follow your intuition, to hear your intuition. Um, so to answer your question, when that I knew something was off for that 1 week, I'm like, yo, what's off? So I was checking myself during the day. I'm like, I'm eating well, I'm sleeping well, I'm going into work, and I'm like, I'm always down and out at work. What am I thinking about? And I'm thinking about all these other projects at that point in time. I had these big, like what were like my life goals at the time that I wasn't chipping away at. And that was eating away at me while I was at work. So during that week, I was able to figure that out. And I found the answer. Well, I need to not work so I can focus on these other things. Um, my bills
mm.
are paid, you know, so like I'm good. Why am I doing this if I'm unhappy?
So
So the
interesting.
answer was very clear, and I
Yeah.
gave it a week. You know what I'm saying? I didn't just out of nowhere, nah, this is it, I quit. I'm like, is this it? So I played with the idea for a few days until I got confirmation. Yep, that's it right there. So that was my
Mm.
process. Those check-ins, and just evaluating things, being rational. Um, and you know what? Not allowing outside influences to really affect you so much.
Oh,
I think
that's a good
because that was
one.
that was all with me. I did all this work on my own. I was asking myself these questions. And how do you feel, Jomar?
Yeah.
What if this were to happen, Jomar? What would happen then? Like talking to myself. and I
Yeah.
got all these clear answers because I didn't have these outside forces messing with my energy, trying to misalign me. But also to that point, I think that's why we also get some of the best advice from complete strangers. It's like complete biased
Mm.
uh, individual that doesn't know anything about you. And if you share a couple key points about your life or about where you might want to go, this complete stranger can enlighten you so much. I've been in so many instances
So,
like that where like I'm literally wandering around, it's happened in the streets of Miami actually. And I'm like, I have no idea what my next move is, but let me just post up here and eat lunch. I'll eat lunch, have my coffee, just people watch. I walk over and I struck this conversation with this guy who's a ballet driver. And I don't know how I initiated it. Um, I think maybe uh, I had him help me out one day when I was parking, but I kind of just became friends with this stranger. But we're just there talking, and it's like, I may have asked how long have you been doing this or something like that, or what brought you here or something. And I shared my path. I'm like, man, I'm trying to get to Puerto Rico, and that would be ideal. I can work out here, um, but that's my main goal. So I'm waiting for this job to come up. And like, without hesitation, he's like, Jamar, you're gonna make it. Like, you're gonna do it. You're gonna be successful. And he's like,
wow.
I know it. Like, look at you. Like, and he just like spoke this
Mhm.
like words of affirmation, just like, whoa, this complete stranger like can catch a particular vibe off of me that sometimes we don't realize. A lot of times we don't realize our strength. So, you're faced with that mirror. That complete stranger will set you on the path, give you that confirmation. So that's definitely a
Yeah.
boost for that intuitive, to whoa, like I am where I need to be and everything's gonna be all right.
Mhm. This the piece on the strangers, I it so resonates for me, and especially on the external influence, because I as you were talking, I was thinking about how many times I had been swayed away from what I ultimately intuitively knew I should have been doing, but I outsourced. I don't want to say, well, maybe, yeah, essentially, yeah, outsource my power to get a second opinion that then influenced me and had me take a slightly different path, but then ultimately ended up bringing me back to what I truly knew was meant for me. And it's so incredible. I think what's beautiful is you have been in Puerto Rico on your own. So I think that, and I don't want to speak for you, but I imagine that has cultivated an even deeper trust your intuition, because you are now limited from external kind of influences and outside opinions, being away from, someone like, family always like, telling you what to do and sharing their opinions. I know I've been navigating this a lot for myself this year because I've been living at home for the last 2+ years after being on my own for 10 in Boston, home in Connecticut now with my family. So it's been especially hard. But I think there was a little switch that flipped for me when I realized, like, oh, I'm actually doing this. Because I think for a long time, I didn't even realize that, like, oh, I'm asking people for their opinion and like blindly following their advice, thinking like they're older than me, they know better, I should do this. And then I'm like, hold on a second. Because then it's like I'm shooting myself in the foot when what I knew deep down I wanted to do didn't end up working out. So then I'm faced with the being back to the same place and realizing, like, okay, I need to actually trust myself. But it does become easier when you kind of like push, I don't even want to say push those people away, but like set those boundaries, or just
Yeah.
remove yourself actually physically, which is what you've done. Like you're in solitude, where you can cultivate that deeper trust and knowing for yourself. So I think that's so beautiful, and your path to finding and connecting to that deeper, and how you shared, you recognize that, through your journey of quitting your job. You just knew it was right. So thank you for sharing that. I want to, because I feel like I could talk to you, Jomar, for like hours. We could go down on rabbit hole conversations, but for the sake of time, let's jump to my little closing questions here. I call them little, they're simple, but we could go really deep with them if we want to. And the first question I love to ask is, what does purpose mean to you? And do you currently feel as though you're living your life's purpose at this time?
I do actually, and I think if I listen to myself and I feel comfortable, I think I'm living my life's purpose, and I feel totally comfortable right now.
Mm.
So I'd have to say yes. Um, what is my life's purpose? I would say exactly just this, what I'm doing now, all this planning. Um, we have these goals, these particular goals that we make, and they may or may not come to fruition. But as long as I'm living my life every day, working towards them and just doing essentially like trying to leave the world a better place than what it was or the same at the very least, I think I've met my life's purpose. Um, I have some
Mm,
wild ambitions, and sometimes I don't even like sharing them. Not necessarily like sharing them, but I don't even bother sharing them. Um, because they're like out of left field for a lot of people until you talk to those people that are in that field and they're like, oh yeah, well this is how you do it. First thing that comes to mind. So what made me think of that is I want to get a pilot's license, and there's no particular necessarily like reason for that. Like I don't have this particular goal. um, I do think there's a possibility to maybe make some money out of it. But just to do that, I mean, if I'm on an island now and I can fly to another island, I think that'd be super freaking cool. And I want to work
even
towards
more
that.
freedom.
Yeah, I want to work towards that. And so I have all these like different little goals um, that I can't necessarily say are a life's purpose, but I think my life's purpose is to chip away at those. Because if at the end of the day I could be at my
Mm,
deathbed and say, "Oh, I've done this, and that," I'm gonna be super content. I'm gonna be in my deathbed with a smile on my face. It's like, oh, I'm happy. I lived a full life. So I'd say that'd be my purpose is
yeah.
to have that at the end. If I get to
I
that
love
point at
that.
the end, because tomorrow ain't even promised. So that's why I
Mm,
love like chipping away at it. And if chipping away at it means a day of rest, I mean, I'm gonna die happy as long as I'm at peace. Peace is like the most important above all. If you're at peace, I think you're living your
yeah.
life's purpose. Put it that way.
That's so good. Yeah. Just one day at a time. What would you say to someone who might have like a burning desire or a passion on their heart that they want to pursue, whether it's starting a business venture, getting into a new hobby, or doing a side project, but they have fear or doubt getting in their way?
Man, just that fear. Like, no, just say no to fear. Uh,
Yeah.
all that doubt and fear, that's the first thing I would say. Like all this stuff is getting in the way. They're like hurdles that you place. It's like you placing a hurdle in front of yourself. It's like you're literally gonna walk this way and you just take hurdles and you throw it in your path. Like that's what you're doing because now you're
Mm,
preventing yourself from going that way when it could be so much easier without any fear. Like what's gonna happen, As long as you're not gonna hurt yourself or hurt others, or I mean that's the main thing. Aside from that, freaking go for it, man. Like what the heck? What, you gonna go broke? There's a good saying
mm,
too that I've heard is go for broke. It's like what are you gonna do? Go broke, and then what's gonna happen? Are you still gonna, be alive? Like yeah, like is the sun still shining? Like come on, man. What do you got to lose? Um, so what I would have to first and foremost, and probably only tell that person is eliminate that fear or whatever's causing the fear. What's the root of that fear? I would try to work on that, and then it's like eliminate that altogether so that you can listen to your intuition and follow your heart, and then just start walking is one foot ahead of the other. Once you walk the path unravels. You see it. So just eliminate that fear, those
good.
obstacles.
Yeah. Get rid of it. It's gone. Sayonara. My last question here. It's my favorite. What is your favorite memory of home?
Mm, I would say probably the times that my aunt would take us to the beach. Those are
Mm.
the best memories. And there have been multiple times because she was the type to, she had an SUV and she'd grab everybody. Come on, we're all going to the beach. We got some snacks. And she'll pick up people in the neighborhood. Like she'll be driving by. We're going to the beach. Hop in. Boom. You hop in through the back, and we'd all go out to the beach, and it would always be a good time. Um, I remember one time particularly, it just started raining, like torrential downpour, and we were all just dying laughing. So it's like nothing is gonna mess with your vibe. You're around people you love, and it's like it's gonna be a good time regardless. Those little simple things, and actually, her daughter, or no, they her daughter ended up living in that house for a while, but the house that they had um, at one point in time had a driveway that would slope down. It was like one of those tile type driveways that would go into like the carport or like the
Mhm.
garage. And I don't know if it was raining or if we just hosed it down, but we hosed it down and like poured shampoo and soap over it, and we would just like slide down it. And it was like the funnest thing, like the simplest thing, but it was so freaking fun because then we're all like soapy and wet, like just sliding around, having the time of our lives. Um, I would say
That's so cool.
those memories with family are the best times back home. My grandma's
Yeah.
porch or like balcony, whatever you want to call it, a little outside area where all my aunts and well, it would be mostly like the aunts dying of laughter, just talking about the times that they got their ass beat and got punished like for doing pranks. Then you hear the pranks that they used to do and the stuff they would get into, and they would all just seeing the joy in their eyes is like amazing. And that's something that's never gonna
Mhm.
happen again. It's like life's path. You know, my grandma ain't around anymore. She'd be dozing off. She'd be like falling asleep. He's like, "Hey, go to bed already." I'm not sleeping. Like I'm not tired, and she'd like be dozing off, and everybody's like laughing in the front porch. Those are the best memories. I gave you a few.
That's so cool.
You told me to list one, but they started flooding my head.
Those are amazing. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing all of that. I was there. I was there with you on the beach in the rain and even sliding down the driveway. That's so fun. Oh, thank
Hmm.
you so much, Jomar, for sharing all the things. I value you so much as a dear friend and for all the reflections and the depth that you are always able to bring in conversations. That's why when I was dreaming into this next season and like talking to different people, I'm like, I gotta have Jomar on the show. It's gonna be such a magical conversation. So thank you for coming on. I'm really excited to get this out into the world. Can you share with people if anyone wants to follow you, where they can find you?
um, yeah. Well, I don't have too much. Like by way of like websites or whatever, but my Instagram is Jomeezy, Jomeezy, and I think it ends with an underscore. I think Jomeezy was taken, and I added like an underscore or something.
Thank you so, so much, Jomar.
Thanks for having me. It's been an honor.
Hi again, it's me. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully, you were able to garner some takeaways and nuggets for your personal home journey. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world if you left a rating and review. And if you'd like to connect deeper, find me at Studio Dumka on Instagram, where I share content on all things home, of course. Sending a big, cozy, homey hug your way, friends. Till next time.